Job chapter 1. I ran my mouth this afternoon to a couple folks, telling them the message I was going to preach tonight. Every time I do that, God won't let me preach the message. My favorite message is the one I wanted to preach tonight. Maybe he'll let me preach it in the morning. Isn't there a verse in the Bible that says he went in bitterness? I think that's going to be like my life's verse. But I've got to tell you about a story about the song they just sang. When I was a youth director 42 years ago, our church bought the two properties beside the church, and it was an old farmhouse on the one right beside the church, and then there was a nice brick home, and that became the parsonage for the pastor. And that farmhouse, I said to the pastor at the time, hey, can we remodel that? Can I remodel this thing and make it a youth center? I wanted to have a youth center. It was just ours, a place just for us, for our teenagers, Actually, I had taken the teens, and we moved to the bus garage. So the buses would pull out, and I'd sweep the floor every Sunday morning and pop a stage down that I had and made a spot just for us. Teenagers like that stuff, and I like that stuff. I liked having my own area. So he said, sure, go ahead. So we had our own little auditorium there. We had a piano in there. And the pastor's son, Brian Bales, played the piano. And we got this little songbook. Once again, I'm trying to do stuff that's just for us. I can't even remember what our name was. We picked some sort of a name, and it's been 42 years, and I'm old. So I had this book. And, I'm leading the songs through this book and such. And that song, Happy Am I, was in the book. I had never actually heard it before. And I had Brian play it a couple times on the piano. I learned the song. So the teenagers were always making fun of me because they said, you never smile. Now, I know they tell you it takes more muscles to frown than smile. It doesn't. Watch. I'm perfectly relaxed. Now that takes muscles. That hurts. If you have 63 years of practice, frowning is simple. So they jokingly, I said, hey, we're going to pick a theme song for our youth group, and they picked Happy Am I to make fun of me. So every Sunday morning, that was the first song we sang, Happy Am I, all of my, and I said, Brian, he first started playing it, Happy Am I. I said, no. Pick up the pace, son. And so he would practice. And he wasn't that good at the beginning, but he got practicing that song. So one Sunday, I had to run next door to the church. Now, this building was probably, maybe 200 yards from the church building. I had to run to the church to do something. He's practicing that song, and he's playing it really fast. Bum, 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 bum. And a deacon had to do something in that building for some reason. And a deacon came in and said, hey, what are you playing? We only play Christian songs. He said, it isn't Christian. It's a theme song for our youth group. Here it is. He had never heard it. And then he said, okay, well, you play it slower than that, son. And he left. I come back over and I said, okay, let's stand up and sing our theme song. And here is the introduction. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, bum. I said, Brian, pick it up. And he said, I can't. And all the kids were laughing. I said, why? He said, I just got chewed out by brother so-and-so. I said, brother who? Came into our building? Chewed you out? I said, pick it up fast. Somebody, wait till I go over there. And the kids were they were waiting. They wanted to run over during church time to watch me rip into this deacon. And I did. Man, I let him have it. I said, don't you ever come in my building, tell one of our kids what to do. You mind your own business over here with all the old fogies. I was tough, man. But see, teenagers need somebody sometime to be in their corner. Somebody that they know, hey, look, I'll fight for you. Truth is, I'll fight for any reason. But, just give me a reason. Some people say, I'll fight at a drop of a hat. I'll fight if I own a hat. I mean, come on. But so when I leaned back and said to my wife, man, I haven't heard that song in a long time. Brings back a lot of good memories. Appreciate the offertory. Where's that young lady at? She slid away. There she is, way back there. Appreciate the offertory. But I think you got to wear yellow Crocs to play like that. So if you're going to pray like that, there she's waving them. Look, you got to wear the yellow Crocs. If you don't have the yellow Crocs, you cannot play like that. Job chapter 1. We're going to read the whole chapter. I say that because if you have some trouble standing, I don't want you to have to stand too long. But if you're physically able to stand with me, we'll read chapter 1 of the book of Job. Job chapter 1, verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, and 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and a great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the east. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned, and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. Now there was a day, by the way, I want you to know something. In all of our lives, there comes a day. I have a sermon called There Was a Day. There's going to come a day of struggle, a day of problem, a day of heartache, a day that doesn't make sense to you. And this is what happens to Job. There was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came up also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made an hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord, and there was a day, there it is again, when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job, and said, the oxen were plowing, and the asses feeding beside them, and the Sabeans fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only alone, and I am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, the fire of God is fallen from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another. By the way, when this third guy comes, if I'm there, or my heritage Italians are there, one guy comes and says, everybody got wiped out, I'm the only one that escaped. Third guy, while he's still talking, everybody got wiped out, I'm the only one that escaped. Third guy comes, I'm grabbing him by the throat and saying, don't you tell me you're the only one that escaped. There's something fishy going on here. How is it every one of you comes, you're the last guy, everybody else is killed? Because we suspect a conspiracy. But it's okay. I think Joe Biden did it. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, verse 17, and said, the Chaldeans made out 3 bands and fell upon the camels and have carried them away and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, and said, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house, and behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. And Job rose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshipped and said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Father, I pray that you bless your word. Speak to us this evening, we pray in Christ's name. Amen. Thank you. You may be seated. The Bible says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verse 18, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. I want you to understand that there's going to come a day, and sometimes those days come often, more than once, when it seems like everything goes wrong, when the wheels come off the wagon, when it seems to you as if something insurmountable has been put in front of you. Something that you think shouldn't have happened, something that doesn't make sense, and yet it happens. Job was a man that, if you study and look at his life, he was a very unlikely candidate for this to happen. By the way, he never said, why me? You know, sometimes a preacher once said, we should be asking God, why not me? Why not me? But as soon as tragedy strikes, when that day comes, we always want to say, why me? He was an unlikely candidate. Let me tell you why he was an unlikely candidate. First of all, Job's character made him unlikely. You'll notice in verse 8 of Job chapter 1, it says, "And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil." He says it again in Job chapter 2 and verse 3. I want you to understand that Job was an unlikely candidate for this to happen because he was a person of high moral fiber and character. And he, of all people, should have said, how can this happen to me? I'm the right kind of guy. Backsliding wasn't part of his character. In Job chapter 23 and verse 11, Job says, "My foot hath held his steps. My ways have I kept and not declined." In Job chapter 23 verse 12, he said, "Neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips." He was not the person that was prone to backsliding. This is the kind of terrible things that's supposed to happen to backsliders. His character was so high. The book of God guided his life. Job chapter 23 and verse 12. "Neither have I gone back from the commandments of thy lips. I have esteemed the words of his mouth more than my necessary food." This is a guy who loves the Bible. This is a guy who's not backslidden. This is a guy who's doing everything he can, and God's testimony about him is he's one that's perfect, upright, eschews evil. And yet all of these terrible things have happened to him. This was a man who was being careful not to expose himself to lustful situations. In Job 31 and verse 1, he said, "I made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid?" This was a man who was putting himself in every position he could to do the right thing. This was a man who was bringing his tithes to God and financially responsible in his community. In Job 31 verse 31, he says, "If the men of my tabernacle said not, oh, that we had his flesh, we cannot be satisfied." He said, they can't say that. They can't say that because I am generous. He was generous to the community, benevolent, caring for the needs of others. In Job chapter 31, verse 32, "The stranger did not lodge in the street, but I opened my doors to the traveler." In chapter 31, verse 19, he said, "If I have seen any perish for want of clothing or any poor without covering," he said, "Hey, I've taken care of everybody I can." These things aren't supposed to happen to a guy like this. He was not only a man of high character, he was a man that had great commodities. You know, these kinds of things aren't supposed to happen to somebody who has money, because we all know money can solve all your problems. How could this happen to him? Verse 3 tells you in our text, his substance also was 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels and 500 yoke of oxen and 500 she-asses and a great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the East. He was the richest man in his day. These kind of things don't happen to people with money, because their money can solve their problems. Guess what? It didn't. And those problems still came. They came to a man of high moral character and a man of great commodity. I want you to understand that Job was also a man of great commitment. Look at your text in Job chapter 1, look at verse 5. "It was so when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning and offered burnt sacrifice according to the number of them all. For Job said, It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their heart." Notice this, "Thus did Job continually." He was a man of great commitment, making sure he did everything he could to care for his family spiritually. These things are not supposed to happen to this kind of a guy. He was an unlikely candidate, and yet it happened. Years ago, I had an evangelist that was at my church. He came to visit. I'd never met him before. And he asked me, Brother Kavanaugh, he came up to me after the morning service and asked me if he could preach in the evening service. Now, 99 times out of 100, 99.9999 times out of 100, I would have said, "No way, Jose." But he was handicapped. He had like an artificial leg. And he had gone to House Anderson like I had, of course, years later. And he had a wife and a whole pile of kids there. And I thought, you know what? He probably needs a meeting. And somehow God just touched my heart. And I said, sure. Very unlike me. That night he told a story, and I usually don't tell other people's story, but here's a story he told. He said it was his first day at House Anderson College. And he was at the chapel service. And he was sitting in the chapel, and they were getting ready to do different things, and there was some girls sitting behind him, and as he sat there in chapel, these girls were talking and giggling and cutting up, and it was the first day. And through the song service, these girls talked and giggled and cut up through the song service, and it sort of bothered him. He was sort of a Pharisee like some of you all. And it's okay, you can smile. I know, truth hurts. And it sort of bothered him, and through the announcements, these girls were talking and cutting up and so forth, and he thought that was a bit disrespectful, but he sort of let it go. And then the preaching came. The man got up to read the text, and they were quiet for the Bible reading, but right after he prayed, these girls started cutting up and talking and stuff, and he turned around and he went, shh, I'll do it this way. Shh. And he said, they just kind of scowled at him. And the sermon kept going on, and they started talking. They kept talking some more. He turned around and he went, shh. And they just scowled at him. They kept talking. He said, I got so angry. It's my first day at a Bible college. I went to public school. I've never been at a Christian school. My first day here. I'm so excited. I'm going to a school where they read the Bible and preach and all this stuff. And these girls are talking back here. He said, I got so angry. The third time I turned around, I said, hey, shut up, the man's preaching. And everybody around looked and caused a big scene. The sermon was over. The sermon was over, and he saw somebody that he knew and started talking and met somebody else. And some guy came up to him and said, hey, listen, there's 3 girls standing outside that door over there waiting for you to come out of chapel. They are waiting for you, and they're going to rip you apart. You better go out that door over there. They're really upset. He said, oh, bless God, I'm going to go out there. And so he went out there. When he got out there, the one girl was the spokesperson for the group, as is usually the case with you women. And she said, listen, we don't know who you think you are, but there is nobody that embarrasses us like that in chapel in front of people. We're going to make sure you never get a date in this school as long as you're here. We're going to make your life miserable. Don't you ever treat us like that. He said, oh, man, I was so filled with righteous indignation. I said, well, you girls are disrespecting the Word of God and disrespecting preaching and disrespecting the Lord himself. Don't you tell me that. Oh, they had a big to-do there in the hallway. Fine. Go about the day, the first day, get the schedules, all of these things. Second day, goes to his first class, English class. They go into the class, a bunch of people, they're all sitting in different places. And the teacher gets up and says, listen, we are going to take attendance by your seats. And I have a seating chart here with your names. And so I want everybody to stand up, go to the walls, I'm going to call your name, and we're going to sit in your assigned seats. And so they called through the roll and finally got to his name, and he came and sat in his assigned seat. And they started down the next row, calling names and putting people, and they called the name of a girl who came and sat right beside him. Guess who that girl was? The same girl that he had words with the day before. And when her name was called, he looked and thought, oh no. And she looked at him in disgust and sat down. And they sat there for a while. The teacher got everybody seated. The teacher said, now, I'll take roll just by empty seats when I come in every day. I want to find out, is there anybody that needs to have their seat moved? Maybe you can't see, you need to be moved closer to the front. You have some sort of physical problems, you need to be by the door. Is there anybody who needs their seat changed? He raised his hand. She said, yes, sir. Now, he has a physical problem, prosthetic leg. She said, yes, sir, do you need to have your seat moved because of a physical problem? No. Why do you need your seat moved? He said, because I don't want to sit by her. And she said, and I don't want to sit by him. And the teacher said, hey, that's not a reason. That's not an excuse. That's your assigned seat, and you're going to sit in it the whole semester. He said the first couple of days, she would sit in her seat and turn as much as she could her back to him. A couple of classes went by, and they had a quiz. When they had a quiz, the teacher said, everybody pass your paper to the right. Had to pass the paper to the right. She had to grade his paper. A couple of more weeks went by, and they started to talk a little bit. A couple more weeks went by and they started actually being friendly to each other. He said, I want you to know tonight that the woman sitting back here with our babies is that girl. And here's what he said. He said, that assigned seat, which I thought was going to be the most miserable seat in the world, that seat that teacher said, that's your assigned seat, and you'll sit in it, that became the biggest blessing of my life. Because I had to sit in my assigned seat. Job is the oldest recorded written book in the Bible. Arguably 6,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, it was written. And here we are, 4,000 years later, talking about a guy that sat in his assigned seat. Now listen to me and hear me well. You may never preach in a platform like this to a group like this. You may never even teach a Sunday school class. You may never be a bus captain. You might never even sing in the choir at church. Can I tell you something? As far as we know, Job never preached a sermon. As far as we know, he never did a miracle. As far as we know, he never led anyone to Christ. All we know about Job is terrible things happened, and Job stayed in his assigned seat. He said, I'll stay there. This is what God has brought my way, and this is my seat, and I'll sit in it. No matter what. He was an unlikely candidate for all of these terrible things to happen. But there was a day. There was a day. Not only was he an unlikely candidate, Job did not understand that there was an unseen conflict. You know what? We have the advantage. We have the advantage of being able to read the scriptures and see what was going on. We can read in verses 6 through 12 about Satan coming and meeting with the Lord and the whole discussion. Job doesn't know that that's going on. He has no idea. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 12 says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Hebrews chapter 12 verse 1 says, therefore seeing we're what? Compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses. I want you to understand that there is something going on that you and I can never see. There's something going on that even while we're here tonight, there is unseen conflict that's going on. The spiritual entities are going through all sorts of things that we will never know about. And when you have that day, when that day comes, when the phone rings and your loved one is dead, or the doctor says it's cancer, or whatever it is, and you feel like this can't be happening to me, you need to come and say, the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job was saying, I will sit in my assigned seat. This is not the seat I would choose. This is not the seat I want. I don't want to sit by her. But what he thought was going to be the worst place in the world for him to be in that seat, by his testimony, turned out to be the biggest blessing of his life. And Job would not be a story that we would read in our Bible, that we would preach on, that we would rehearse for thousands of years if Job gave in or caved when there was a day came. I want you to understand that Job was an unlikely candidate. Job had an unseen conflict that was going on. I want you to also understand that Job was a man that through the midst of this went through an unbelievable crisis. You know, sometimes we play this down. There is a cost for discipleship. And here's the problem. We never see the great benefit because quite often we are unwilling to pay the price. When the conflict comes, we run. we run. When the crisis comes, we don't want to pay the price. But Job was saying, this is my assigned seat. I will sit in this seat. I will pay the price. You know what's interesting about Christian people and Christianity in general? We don't have a problem with God sacrificing it for us. But we sure struggle with sacrificing for him. And can I tell you something? I know things can be tough. I know. Listen, I've lost loved ones. I've had things happen. I really do. Honestly, I got to tell you this, though. I honestly feel like the most blessed person that ever walked the earth. I really do. Because I watch so many hardships and so many struggles that so many people have, and I say, thank you, Lord, that that's not me. I don't think God thinks apparently I'm not strong enough to handle those things. And there's a situation where I'm glad I'm weak. Because God doesn't bring those things my way. I have to hold the hand of people that go through all of those things. And I walk away and think, I'm so blessed. I am so blessed. But I got news for you. When Job had all of those things happen to the most unlikely candidate, the person of such high moral character, in a situation where he could not understand or see the conflict that was going on, and there was something so much bigger than him, he was willing to make the sacrifice, to pay the price of discipleship. And sometimes all the price requires is that you sit in your assigned seat. Don't leave the seat. Don't leave the seat. You don't understand what's happened to me. I don't care. Don't leave your seat. Stay in your assigned seat. I grew up in Allison Park, Pennsylvania, a little town just outside of Pittsburgh, 12 miles from the point, the center of town. I started going to Calvary Baptist Church when I was 5 years old. My mother literally drugged me to church. I did not want to go there. She drugged us to church. We were Sunday morning only people. As a teenager, as a kid, I made some profession of faith I don't remember. Got baptized with my mother and my sister. My father, of course, Catholic, had nothing to do with any of this. Didn't want to have anything to do with it. I hope the Lord will let me tell you in one of these services, it remains, his testimony, because it's a miraculous story. But I got right with God as a teenager at a camp. A girl in our church, in our youth group, invited me to go to camp. I was a Sunday morning only person. I played sports in the public school. You know, I was a church kid on Sunday morning and then a devil the rest of the week. I ran with the guys on the teams, did all the terrible stuff they do that I don't even want to talk about. I came to church one Sunday morning and at the end of Sunday school, this girl said to me, "Hey, are you going to teen camp?" And I thought she was asking me out. I said, "Sure, yeah, I'm going. Yeah, that's me, I'm going, yeah." So I went to the youth director and I said, "Hey, I want to go to youth camp." And he looked at me and he said, "You want to go to youth camp?" I was sort of offended by that. I thought he looks at me like, what? I'm thinking, what am I like the devil himself? And I said, "Yeah, I want to go to youth camp." He said, "Well, we're leaving tonight. We're leaving tonight after church." He said, "If you really want to go, I'll talk to your mother." I said, "Okay." And I actually walked away from there a little bit like, dang, you look at me like that? You know, I'm a Pittsburgher. Are you looking at me? I'll slap your eyeballs out the side of your head, boy. So after church, in the lobby, he catches me and says, "Come on, let's go talk to your mom." He goes and says, "Hey, Mrs. Grimaldi, your son would like to go to teen camp." And my mother looks at me and says, "You want to go to teen camp?" I've never been to a youth activity, ever. I've never gone. Why? Because they're all geeky, square, goofy kids. Nah, I got important things to do. Now, I got to go to this youth. I don't know what it is that I'm just signing up for, but now I got to go. Because you looked at me, "You want to go?" "Yes, I want to go." "Well, I'll be glad to pay if you'll go." "I'm going." He said, "Here's a list of the things he needs and what is it." Went home, got everything ready, went to youth camp. Get on the bus to go down there, and I quickly figured out this is not a date. She was just being polite. She barely would talk to me. And the girls had to sit, in the front, I'm sorry, in the back, and the boys had to sit in the front. I'm thinking, dang, this is not working out the way I planned. You know? Wow. I get to youth camp, and all the guys we're there kind of early. It was in Maryland, Miracle Acres Youth Camp. And there were some big fields like you have here, and all the buses parked out in the field, and there was nothing to do until lunch. And we were there in the morning. So we all picked up a pickup football. We're playing two-hand touch out there, and, you know, guys are coming, and you're just, okay, 4 of you go on that side, 4 of you go on this side, and sort of like your softball game out there. You end up with like 1 million people on each team, and have kind of crazy rules. Okay, that tree is out of bounds. You're allowed to throw a pass over the bus, you know, and all these crazy rules. So we're playing, and now one of the counselors from our team, from our church rather, that's there with us and on our team out there playing, he has just finished his stint at Pitt University. He's the first string punter and a backup quarterback. He actually had tryouts with the San Francisco 49ers, 2 or 3 other teams. He never made the 53-man roster. He'd be on a team and go through and then get cut and go to another team. He was on 2 or 3 pro teams. He's on our team. He's like a 3rd-string quarterback and a 1st-string punter from Pitt. So we're going to kick off to the other team, and he punts the ball. Now, I was really thin and really fast back then. I know it's hard to imagine now. I was the fastest guy on our basketball team, baseball team, and football team. I was little, fast. We would go out into a field, and he would punt the ball. I'd stand there with him. He'd punt the ball, and I would run, and I would catch it in the air. The guy could punt the ball 50, 60 yards and a mile in the air. Matter of fact, he was, for a short while, he was a coach, a special teams coach that worked with punters at Pitt. This guy punts the ball, and I go flying down. And here's this old guy, probably about my age, old guy standing there, and here comes the ball. Now, I'm running down, and I'm looking over my shoulder, and I can see that ball coming. And right as the ball touches his hands, I go, boom, with 2 hands on his shoulders, boom. And he falls down, the ball hits his chest, bounces straight up in the air, boom, bounces straight up in full stride. I catch it and run for a touchdown. Spike the ball, boom. My team's going, ah! This guy gets up. What do you call that? I said, well, in Pittsburgh, we call that 2-hand touch. This man is mad. I mean, madder than a wet hen. So we go through the rest of the day, and by the way, we were blowing these people away, you know, I don't know what the score is, it's a crazy score. All right, it's 56-2, you know, whatever. Day goes by, blah, 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 all the stuff. We go to chapel. They had these theater seats, these old wooden theater seats that flipped up and down, and every time you stood up, you heard clack, 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 all the seats flipping up, you know, and they're singing, there's skits, it's like an hour program. They introduce a speaker. Here comes this old guy. It's that guy. And when he walks up there, all the guys in the youth group realize I'm new to the youth group. This is my first time here. They're going, oh, 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 pointing at me, and I'm sliding out. I slid down so much that the seat popped up. Bang, and made that noise, and then everybody looked, you know. And I'm thinking, oh, man, this guy's going to unload on me. Monday night he preached. And the guy gets up and says, this is Pastor Creed, and he's going to be preaching tonight and then 3 times every day. I'm thinking, oh, no. Monday night, doesn't say a word. Tuesday morning, not a word. Tuesday afternoon, evening, not a word. Wednesday, nothing. Thursday morning, nothing. Thursday afternoon, nothing. The last sermon Thursday night, I'm thinking, all right, he's been waiting. He's been waiting. He's going to nail me now. Thursday night, he doesn't say a word about it. I got saved at home at my bedside. Never walked an aisle in a church in my life. And I really can't tell you what he preached on Thursday night. But God crushed my heart. Just crushed it. And I walked an aisle for the first time in my life. When I came down the aisle, they didn't have a big altar like this. It was very small. And so they'd send you outside, out the doors. And I went outside, and counselors were coming up to people and asking them, why are you coming, why are you coming? They had these little books, altar worker books that they had given them at the camp. And I've never gone forward at a church before. I've never filled out a card. I've never had to talk to someone. I've never had to pray. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And the guy says, why are you coming? And the only thing I could think of was, I laughed to this day. I said, to give up my motorcycle. Just came out. I mean, it just came out. And he went, it wasn't in his book. Wasn't there. He said, well, go over by that tree and pray. And he's on to the next person. God knew I didn't need that guy. I went over and got down on my knees beside a tree. And I said, God, I don't know what you're trying to do, but I know the way I'm living is wrong. And whatever you want, I'll do it. I'll do it. I decided that night I'd walk away from all the sports teams. And it wasn't the sport, it was the guys on the teams and what we had done and were doing. I couldn't be around those guys anymore. So I walked away from that. Very soon I went to a youth conference, first time in my life, started going to all the activities, started going to church. The youth director tricked me into soul winning. I love telling this story. He asked me to come out and visit on a bus route with him on a Saturday. I said, sure, I'll go. He said, you stand behind me, be my silent partner. I've never had one class, never one lesson, nothing. So he's knocking on doors and talking to people, witness to a couple people. He comes to like the 7th or 8th door. He knocks on the door and an older man answers. He says, sir, let me ask you a question. If you died today, if you knew for sure you'd go to heaven. The guy says, no. He says, okay, well, Joe here's going to tell you how to do that. And I'm thinking, you told me I was going to be the silent partner. I don't know what to do. He steps aside. Joe, go ahead and tell him. And I'm thinking, dude, what? So I had a God Simple Plan of Salvation tract in my hand because I was carrying the tracts, pink and gray. I'm carrying the tracts. And I said, well, here, I gave him one, and we read it together. So I didn't know what to do. I'd never done this before. And the whole time I'm thinking, wait till we leave this door. I'm going to rip this youth director, lie to me. I read it, and I'm reading, we follow along here, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, you agree with all this? Yeah. And well, here's a prayer here. Would you want to pray that prayer and get saved? Yes. I'm thinking, dang, okay. I said, well, read it. He bows his head and reads the card. I looked at the guy, I said, and he's just a youth director, big grin. You youth directors. Big grin on his face. We walked away. He said, Joe, you won your first soul. I'm thinking, yeah, well, you know what, dude? I'm mad. Come back to church. Sunday night, he stands up and gives a testimony. Joe Grimaldi, this great soul winner, won his first soul. I'm thinking, yeah, right. You shoved me into this. I read a tract to some guy. I fall into this. All of a sudden, I'm this, his shining disciple. He's trying to work with me and disciple me. And for about a year and a half, this man puts his life into me. I surrendered to preach. I graduated from public school a year early. Only went to public school 3 years. Went in and talked to them. Said, I want to get out of here. God's calling me to preach. I want to go to Bible college. We figured out my schedule so I could go. Went to Bible college. Finished my first year. January, second semester of the next year, I get a call. My youth director, who's 42, dropped dead of a heart attack. And I felt like my whole world had ended. I walked away from school and got on a plane and flew home to the funeral. And I was ready to quit. I was ready to quit. I felt like, God, you took my youth director. This is the man who's my spiritual father. This is the guy who's like everything to me. And you took him like that. He went in and laid down on the bed, a little tired. His wife said, well, I'll fix dinner. I'll call you when you're done. When dinner's ready, she walked in, and he was cold dead, laid in the bed. I was angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at the people at the church who didn't pay him enough because he had to work another job. I was angry at everybody. And I wasn't going back to college. And I wasn't going to preach. I wasn't. I was done. His brother, who I didn't know very well, was a pastor of a little church in a house. And the funeral was there. And after the funeral, and I stood and said a few words through tears about my youth director. He came and shook my hand and he said, Joe, all Frank could do is talk about you. All he taught, he just raved about Joe Grimaldi, Joe Grimaldi. This boy's going to do something, and God's going to use him. And he said, all he did, he said, I want you to know something. Every time you preach and everything you do, Frank's watching. And he's so proud of you. Don't let him down. Had to go back. You know why? Was my assigned seat. How could you take this guy, most spiritual guy I've ever met, most sacrificial man I ever met? It's not right, it's not fair. But you see, even though he was an unlikely candidate, there was an unseen conflict going on that I knew nothing about. And the spiritual powers, the devil himself, was trying to make sure one preacher got out of the ministry. Let's get rid of him. What's the one thing we can take that's so dear to him that will cause him to quit? We'll take him. Thank God that somebody convinced me to sit in my assigned seat. I got out of college and I went to my home church. I was the youth director and the bus director there, and to be honest with you, I was in heaven. I thought it was the greatest gig in the world. They're paying me, and I am having so much fun building bus routes and working with teenagers, and this will be the greatest thing in the world. And the pastor came to me one day and said, listen, next week, next Sunday, I'm reading my resignation letter. Are you kidding me? He said, so when a new pastor comes, you're going to need to offer him your resignation. I don't know what's going to happen. Not only did he leave, he left, the principal of the school left. There was 4 male staff members. Everybody left but me. They made Mr. Excitement here, Mr. Happy Am I, the chairman of the pulpit committee. I get to find and hire my new boss. I'm not happy about any of this. I want out. I want to leave. The new guy comes. I said, listen, I'm going to give you a few months to get settled in, and I'm out of here. After a couple of weeks, he called me and he said, listen, you need to stay. I need you. I said, I can't stay. I can't be here. I just can't be here. He sat down and said, listen, would you pray about this? Please, I want you to stay. You need to stay. And the more I begged God about it and talked to God, you know what he kept saying? It's your assigned seat. Stay in it. Stay in it. A few years go by and that pastor actually falls into sin. Terrible sinful situation with another man. And I think my world's coming to an end again. And he says, you need to pastor this church. You should have taken this church 7 years ago. And that's why I asked you to stay. The church voted me in 90-some%. I'm now the pastor of my home church. What I always thought I wanted to do, what I dreamed of as a kid. This is it. 20 years go by. I'm going to try to cut the story short. 20 years go by, and a group of people in Minnesota are trying to start a church. And I'm invited by somebody to go and preach and help them organize, show them how to get things started, what to do, da-da-da-da-da. And I go there and I meet with them. And on the 4th of July, which was a Monday, just like it is this year, they all had off work, so we met at a restaurant, Perkins Restaurant, Perkins North. They had a Perkins North and a Perkins South. To help organize this church. And I sat down, I showed them, I met with the other Baptist preachers in the town on a map. Here's where you need to go to get out of their way. Here's the Secretary of State's information to do this. Here's how you get your tax exempt number. Here's all the data. Here's all the information. Here it is. And I'll help you try to find somebody. We'll call my friends at different colleges. And the guy says, will you come and be our pastor? I said, oh, no, not me. Not me. I'm pastor of my home church. I'm where I want to be. He says, will you pray about it? I said, no. And he looked odd at me. He looked at me. And the conversation went on, and this guy older man and I could tell, furrowed brow, he was upset. His name was Dan. I said, Dan, what's wrong? He said, listen, with all due respect, you're supposed to be a man of God. I asked you to pray about something, and you said no. I said, Dan, I learned a long time ago, don't ask God questions you don't want to hear the answers to. And there ain't no way I want to leave my home church and come here with a few people in a Girl Scout lodge, 4 families and a couple of stragglers, and try to start a church. Ain't happening. I left there and was going home. Carl Hatch was in a terrible car accident. Almost died. He was supposed to preach tent revival in New Jersey. The people in the tent revival in New Jersey, the pastor out there, Ron Owens, called me, said, Brother Grimaldi, is there any way that I could talk you into coming out here Monday and preaching this tent revival? Carl Hatch can't do it. He had a car accident, almost died. He said, I'll fly you out here on Monday morning. I'll fly you back on Saturday. You'll only miss Wednesday night at your church. I said, okay, I'll do it. So I get there. The hotel is in the middle of a commercial district. There's not even a place I can walk to. There's not a Walmart, not a McDonald's, nothing. The guy drops me off at my hotel. He says, I will pick you up at lunch. We'll make some visits. Lunchtime, he picks me up, makes some visits, drop me back off. I'll pick you up for church. So all week long, I'm a person that wakes up at 3 or 4 in the morning. I am, I can only look at my sermon so long. And now I have all this dead time on my hands. So, okay, nowhere to go, nothing to do, I will pray. You're getting ahead of the story now. Every day while I'm praying, all I can see is the faces of these little kids that are sitting on the front rows of the Girl Scout Lodge. And I'm thinking, they could really do something for God if the right preacher goes there. They could really do something for God if the right preacher goes there. Boy, they could really do something for God. But they've gone through so many church splits and so much problem. If the wrong guy goes there, those kids aren't even going to be in church. I was haunted all week long. On Saturday, they flew me back to Pittsburgh. Saturday night, I got a call from an evangelist friend of mine. He said, I'm driving all night. My church was only about a mile from the Turnpike exit. He said, I'm going to get off at that exit at the Eaton Park there. Could you meet me there just for some fellowship? I need to try to stay awake. I'm going to get some coffee, maybe grab a donut and talk a little bit. I said, sure. So when I go up there, it's like 11 o'clock at night, Saturday night. I'm telling him, I'm struggling with this situation. Do you know anybody I can recommend to them to be the pastor? And I tell him the whole situation. While he's listening to me tell the story, he's looking at my face and he says, Joe, maybe you need to go. I said, not me. Not me. I'm pastor in my home church. I'm where I want to be. I can sit here in my kitchen and look out the window to the church cemetery and see the headstones for my grandparents. And the grave plots beside them for my parents and for me. And I've told people my next move is right there. That's it. And here's what he said to me. He said, Joe, I can't answer this for you, but I can tell you this. If you're not willing to put Isaac on the altar, you're never going to find the ram in the thicket. I told him when this was over, I'm going to write a book. And the book's going to say, sometimes there's no ram in the thicket. Or maybe sometimes Isaac dies. So I went home that night. Once again, now I can't sleep. Sunday morning is going to quickly approach here. It's about 1 in the morning. And, and now this guy's told me all this stuff. I can't sleep. And I get down on my knees beside my bed and I say, God, I don't want to go to Minnesota. I don't want to leave my home church. I do not want to do this. But if that's what you want, I will put that on the altar. I will lay Isaac on the altar. Please show me the ram in the thicket. Show me the right guy to help these people. But if it's me, all right, I'll put it on the altar. Huh. Yeah, Isaac died. And I knew I had to go. My family will verify this. For 3 years, I was bitter. I went in bitterness. For 3 years, I struggled. I struggled with being there. I struggled with not being at my home church. I struggled with the whole situation. You got to know something, though. During that period of time, we sent 18 of these little kids. After 13 years, we sent 18 of them to Providence Baptist College. Of those kids, many of them are in the ministry today. like a Stephen Lesmeister and an Isaiah Hansen, and on and on and on it goes. 18 of them. Do you think God didn't have a plan? Do you think God didn't have an idea? Do you think that that burden I had 13 years ago for these little kids wasn't something God was orchestrating? Because there was an unseen conflict going on. And I needed to shut my mouth and say, excuse me, I can't sit here. Excuse me, I need to be removed. Why? I don't like her. I'm not sitting by her. No, that's your assigned seat. And you need to sit in it. When the time came where God was burdening my heart to leave Minnesota and go to Ohio. Look, to this day, I love Pittsburgh. When I go back to Pittsburgh to visit and go up on the hill and look down over the city, I cry almost every time. I love that place. When I got to Minnesota, I fell in love with the people, some of the nicest people in the world. Just love those people, love those people. I left the place I love. Then now God wanted me to leave the people I loved. And I said, what? I'm too old for this. I can't do this. 20 years here, 13 years here, and now I have to move again? But there's an Isaac Ish that's here because of that move. There's a Karina that's here because of that move. There's her sister who went to a different college, which will remain nameless, because of that move. You see, really, my job's kind of simple. All I got to do is listen to the teacher, and when the teacher says, that is your assigned seat, I close my mouth and I sit in it. It's unfair. Doesn't matter. This shouldn't happen to me. Doesn't matter. There's something going on that none of us know. And in His infinite wisdom, He's given each of us an assigned seat. And though you may not be so successful in your mind to be able to move mountains and create miracles and preach messages, they can talk about you like they talked about Job thousands of years from now because you sat in your assigned seat. They took your family and you stayed there. They took your health and you stayed there. They took your wealth and you stayed there. You stayed there. You stayed there. You sat in your seat. No matter what the devil brought your way. Job was an unlikely candidate. There was an unseen conflict. There was an unbelievable crisis that came his way. But in the midst of all of that, he had an unfazed commitment. An unfazed commitment that could not be stopped. So let me ask you a question. When that day comes for you, or when that day has come for you, were you able to just sit in your assigned seat? It's really so simple, it's scary, but it's the most difficult thing to do. To sit in your assigned seat. The songwriter wrote, when I cannot understand God's leading, when I do not know the reason why, He should choose the path that lies before me. Still to Him in faith I can reply, I will trust when I cannot see. When I'm faced with adversity and believe His will is always best for me, I will trust when I cannot see. You know, when the Bible tells you that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, that's what sitting in your assigned seat is all about. So what's your assigned seat? What's the seat that the devil wants to get you out of? You know, in sports, a great way to win is to get the other players out of their position. Get that football player in the wrong position. Get that basketball player in the wrong position. Even in baseball, get them in the wrong place. Get them out of their spot. And the devil would like nothing more than to get you out of your assigned seat. So when there is a day that comes for you, if you can't do anything else, sit in your assigned seat. Would you bow your heads, close your eyes with me this evening? Father, I pray that you bless us tonight. Lord, you know how much I did not want to preach this message. I don't know who this message is for. I don't know why you wanted me to preach it. But as best as I could tonight, I tried to sit in my assigned seat.